Welcome to Total Spectrum Spotlight, an informative look and an insightful discussion of today's legislative issues and political trends.
Hi there, I'm Congressman Eric Paulson, and today for the Spotlight interview we have Senator John Thune from the great state of South Dakota. Senator Thune is the number 2 Republican leader in the U.S. Senate, serving as the Republican whip. I want to thank Senator for joining us today, but first I need to mention that when he's not engaged in his leadership duties, you may find him on Instagram, either doing one-arm push-ups or doing backflips in the Missouri River, probably to keep up with your 5 grandkids.
Yeah, you got to stay young somehow, right?
That's right, yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to spend some time with you today, and look, we're in 2022. It's a new election. Well, it's not an election year, it's a midterm election year, but it's a legislative year. Right. And we're at a time now with a lot going on. Russia's threatening Ukraine. The economy is stalled, but is poised to get back on track, and the legislative agenda is on the horizon. So give us some perceptions or perspectives and insights on what we can expect to see legislatively with the president's agenda kind of stalled out right now.
Right. Well, I think, Eric, that to your point, it is a little bit stalled out, and that has a lot to do with the how sort of, I think, aggressive their agenda is. We would argue radical, relative to the mandate they got from the people. The $5 trillion spending package financed with tax increases and debt is, at least right now, not going anywhere, although they're still putting pressure on Manchin and Sinema to try to get them to yes on that. So that's still kind of hovering out there. What's going to occupy most of our time here, probably for the next couple of months anyway, will be the Supreme Court nomination. As soon as the president makes a nomination, we'll start confirmation process. Of course, that's can be lengthy, although I suspect they'll try and expedite it. But I think in terms of other things that might be on the Democrats' agenda between now and the end of the year, they're going to try and, like I said, restart this so-called Build Back Better bill, or what we call the tax and spending spree. I think there could be something that happens in the area of big tech. They've reported out a bipartisan bill, an antitrust bill out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm on the Senate Commerce Committee. We've got some jurisdiction over that issue too, and we've got some other things that we'd like to be doing. But most of what they're going to be doing, by and large, are going to be things that most of our members are not going to support. So I tell people we're trying to keep it on the rails between now and November in hopes that we can get some reinforcements and provide a check and balance. I think the inflation issue is largely of their own making. But that's having a real impact on the economy.
Well, and the House has been fairly aggressive in passing large partisan bills over to the Senate, and the Senate has to take a more bipartisan support with the evenly divided Senate. But do you expect Build Back Better will get split up into pieces, or is that difficult to do with reconciliation, for instance?
Well, I mean, I think it is more challenging because you have to have a legislative vehicle, and you can use reconciliation. They've got a favorable ruling from the parliamentarian in the Senate here recently that enables them to use it more frequently. But there are pieces of it I think they'll want to move. Per child tax credit, for example, the increase, as you know, when we did the tax bill in 2017, we doubled it from $1,000 to $2,000. COVID took it up to $3,600 for children under 6, and that's where they want to keep it.
Sure. Well, and now many of our viewers are in Arizona or in Georgia, for instance, where the economy's been pretty good, but yet a lot of employers are facing worker shortages, healthcare mandates, rising prices, inflation. Do you view, as some do, that some of the Build Back Better legislative initiatives could exacerbate inflation or make it worse, or would it make it better?
I think it makes it worse, and as you know, the textbook definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. And the Democrats were able to successfully get a $2 trillion bill passed last March through reconciliation at 51 votes in the Senate, which we think exacerbated the problem. And obviously what they're talking about with Build Back Better is another $5 trillion in spending, much of which would go kind of directly into the economy in form of child tax credits and tax increases too, which I think all get passed on. So I don't think there's anything on their agenda right now that doesn't make the inflation situation worse. The other issue, which is I think really contributing to it, is the energy situation. Energy is sort of baked into everything that we buy, whether it's transportation or food. And if you look at shutting down a lot of these domestic energy projects, now going hat in hand to OPEC and asking them to increase production. We were, in a place where we were largely energy independent in the previous administration. So, to your point, I think the Biden administration, if they want to deal with inflation, some of these other economic issues, they can do it in many respects just by how they treat, the regulatory process. They can do a lot of these things by executive action. But to the degree that Congress plays into this, my assumption is, again, that the Democrats are going to try and move pieces of the larger $5 trillion package. But when you're $30 trillion in debt already, it just seems like, and you've got inflation that's the worst in 40 years, it seems like a really bad idea to flood the zone with more spending.
Sure. And I know a lot of small businesses breathed a sigh of relief when some of the rates didn't go up, thanks to the filibuster of Senator Sinema, Senator Manchin, for instance. But I assume there are some other tax increases that could be on the horizon as a part of their package, right, to finance some of these initiatives that could be harmful to our economy.
There are, and so far, give Sinema and Manchin both credit for shaping or at least restraining the size of this thing. Manchin more on the spending side. He has objections to how the money is spent and whether it's spent in a fake way, in a phony way, in terms of how it's paid for as relative to the sort of the 10-year budget window. Her impact, I think, has been more on the tax side.
Sure.
She's been really good about holding the line on certain types of tax increases, cap gains, corporate, individual. She has agreed to some international tax increases, which we think are harmful too, but at least it's sort of restrained, I think, the Democrats' appetite and what they can do, even at 51 votes under reconciliation. And so I hope they hold their ground on that. I know they're under an enormous amount of pressure, particularly after the filibuster vote 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And that was truly, you don't see many displays around here of political courage. It's kind of like a unicorn, Eric, to see real political courage, but they were under tremendous pressure on that and stood firm. And so we saw an example of that that's pretty rare.
Right. Now, I'm just curious, knowing is what we've seen with the pandemic, more of a focus on some of China's unfair trade practices, and being on the finance committee that you've served on, knowing that a robust trade agenda is good for finding new markets in agriculture, exports, for instance. Anything on the horizon that might, one, address with some of China's unfair trade practices, or engage in a more robust trade agenda? There hasn't been much activity recently. Do you see anything coming down the road that could be addressed there?
No, it's been really quiet, and as you know, as a former Ways and Means Committee member, and of course in the Senate Finance Committee has jurisdiction over trade matters, I think there's some real opportunity there, but we haven't seen any proposal for trade promotion authority from the administration, and that's what it takes to help expedite some of these trade deals. I think there's a real opportunity to kind of isolate China, not only from an economic standpoint, but also there's obviously great national security implications from all this. And by doing business with some of those countries in the region, but we need to have that authority to enter into some of those multilateral agreements. So the administration, for whatever reason, and I know they've got opposition from Democrats here on Capitol Hill, but there are a lot of Republicans who would join them in a bipartisan way to support trade promotion authority that would enable us to get back at the table and become more competitive globally. Obviously, there are things that we can do when China crosses the line, retaliatory steps that can be taken by the administration, and I hope they'll be exercising those options. But I think the best thing that we can be doing is being aggressively opening up more markets, doing business with more countries in that region of the world, and putting more pressure on China and isolating them for the way that they do business and the kind of economy and political system that they have.
Well, hopefully we'll get some more focus on that. The Olympics are just around the corner, of course, and that may draw some more attention to it. Well, as we close out, one thing I should mention is that you made the decision to run for election again and continue to serve in the Senate, which is great. We need more thoughtful leaders, obviously, that are engaged in Washington. I'm just curious, it's possible the Republicans could recapture the Senate and have new leadership. What would the approach be of a Republican Senate and a President Biden? And how would you work with the administration going forward?
It would be challenging because, Eric, there are so many areas. Now, what happened under Bill Clinton at the time was when he lost in the midterm elections, he actually came to the middle, and they were able to do some business with him here. And I'm hoping that would happen with Biden because he's been so pushed to the hard left by that wing of his party. The Bernie Sanders wing of the party is really ascendant in Democrat politics. And so much of this agenda is way out of the mainstream, so to speak. So if we could get the majority back in either the House and or the Senate, I think that we could, maybe he comes to the middle. But there are things, trade promotion authority, I would argue some energy stuff, because right now they're just obsessed with the idea of electric vehicles to the exclusion of everything else, and there's a lot of good other energy innovations out there. I would argue that something in the tech space, I think more transparency and accountability on some of those issues. So there are some things that we could do. But we'll see. I mean, obviously the voters are going to have that decision, and it seems to me at least that the environment's pretty good for us, because I think people are rejecting what I think has been a government that's run really from the far left wing ideologically of the political spectrum in a way that's had some pretty harmful impacts on people's lives.
Sure. Well, we thank you for joining us today, and I know you're going to have a full plate on the schedule coming up here soon, but send us a review. Thanks for joining us today, Senator Thune, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for watching Total Spectrum Spotlight. For more information about Total Spectrum, please visit us at totalspectrumsga.com. Total Spectrum, strategies uniquely focused on your success.